She was wearing the dress she'd bought 3 years ago, the one that used to fit her perfectly before the babies, before the stress, before life happened. The dress was too tight now, cutting into her waist, making her uncomfortable all evening. But she'd put it on anyway because her husband had said they were going out for dinner, just the two of them, for the first time in months. She thought maybe he was finally noticing her again. She thought maybe this was the moment when things would change. She was wrong. Before we start this story, I need you to do something for me. Leave a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know where my audience is. And at the very end of the story, I need you to rate it from 0 to 10. Because this is not just a story about a woman being humiliated by her husband. This is a story about what happens when vanity meets cruelty, when a man mistakes his body for his worth, and when a woman discovers that sometimes the greatest transformations happen not for other people, but for yourself. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, the wife he stopped seeing, the woman who rebuilt herself, and the moment when her husband finally understood the cost of his arrogance. Let's find out what changed everything. Marcus Mitchell was 42 years old and he'd spent the last 15 years perfecting his body. He went to the gym 5 days a week. He ate exactly 600 grams of protein every day. He measured his body fat percentage monthly. He had six-pack abs and muscles on top of muscles. He looked like the kind of man who belonged in a fitness magazine. And he was acutely, painfully aware of how he looked. He was so aware of his appearance that it had become his entire identity. Sarah Mitchell was 39 years old. She'd been a beautiful woman when she was younger. Marcus had married her at 23, when she was a dancer with perfect proportions and perfect skin and perfect everything. But Sarah had given up dancing when she had children. She'd given up a lot of things for her family. She'd gained weight after 2 pregnancies. She'd never lost all of it. She carried approximately 40 extra pounds on her frame. She had stretch marks. She had cellulite. She had the body of a woman who'd spent the last 15 years prioritizing her children over her appearance. Marcus had stopped noticing her somewhere around year 5 of their marriage. It had been gradual. First, he'd stopped complimenting her. Then he'd stopped looking at her the way he used to look at her. Then he'd started making comments about her appearance. Nothing cruel exactly, but small observations that added up over time. You know, the gym has a women's section if you ever want to join me. I found this diet plan that's supposed to be really effective. My coworker's wife just lost 70 pounds. She looks incredible. Sarah had tried to lose weight. She'd joined a gym. She'd tried several diets. But she was exhausted all the time. She was taking care of 2 children, working part-time as a freelance graphic designer, managing the household, and trying to maintain a marriage that was slowly becoming one-sided. The weight loss had been difficult, and the results had been slow. After 6 months of effort, she'd lost 12 pounds. She still had about 28 to go before she'd be back to her pre-pregnancy weight. It had taken a toll on her. Not just physically, but emotionally. She'd started to internalize the idea that she wasn't attractive anymore. She'd started to believe that her body was the problem. She'd started to feel like she was failing at being the kind of wife Marcus deserved. What she didn't understand was that no amount of weight loss would have been enough. What she didn't understand was that Marcus had already decided she was a failure, and no body transformation was going to change that. The dinner was at a new restaurant that had opened in their city, a place that was apparently frequented by fitness influencers and models. Sarah had been nervous about going there. She'd known, somehow, that she wasn't going to fit the aesthetic. She'd known that she was going to feel out of place. But she'd put on the tight dress anyway, because Marcus had asked her to dress up, and she'd wanted to do what he wanted. They arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock. It was immediately obvious that this was not a normal restaurant. The clientele was almost entirely composed of people who looked like they spent their lives in gyms. Every woman was thin. Every man was muscular. Everyone was beautiful in that specific, homogenized way that comes from intensive physical training and careful nutrition and probably some cosmetic procedures. Sarah felt herself shrinking. She felt her dress becoming tighter. She felt the eyes of the room scanning her and moving on because she wasn't worth their attention. They were seated at a table in the center of the room. Sarah understood that this was intentional. Marcus wanted to be seen. He wanted people to notice him. He wanted to be associated with this place and these people. About halfway through dinner, a woman approached their table. She was probably 26 years old, with a body that looked like it had been designed by a sculptor. She was one of the fitness influencers who worked at the restaurant as a model, basically, just to be visible and attractive and make other people feel inadequate. "Marcus," the woman said, her voice delighted. "I didn't know you were coming tonight. How are you? You look amazing as always." She was looking directly at Marcus, her attention completely focused on him. She barely glanced at Sarah. "Jenna," Marcus said, standing up to hug her. His face had transformed. He was smiling in a way that he hadn't smiled at Sarah in months. "It's so good to see you. Have you been training hard?" "Always," Jenna said, laughing. "You know how it is. The gym is my life." They talked for several minutes. Sarah watched her husband flirt with this woman. She watched him laugh at jokes that weren't even funny. She watched him completely forget that his wife was sitting at the table. And then Jenna said something that would change everything. "So," she said, gesturing vaguely at Sarah, "is this your sister or something?" The question was asked innocently, as if she genuinely didn't understand the relationship. But the implication was clear. She was asking if Sarah was related to Marcus in some way that would explain why she looked so different from him. Marcus laughed. "This is my wife actually," he said. And then he said something that would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. He said, I know. It's weird. We used to match back when we were younger. But you know, life happens. She stopped taking care of herself." He said it casually, as if he was just making an observation. As if he wasn't describing her as a failure. As if he wasn't humiliating her in front of a stranger and in front of the entire restaurant. Sarah felt her face go hot. She felt tears beginning to form. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to stand up and leave. But she couldn't move. She was frozen in her chair, wearing the too-tight dress, being evaluated and found lacking by everyone in the room. Jenna laughed awkwardly and excused herself, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Marcus sat back down and continued eating as if nothing had happened. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to realize that he'd done anything wrong. Sarah excused herself and went to the bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and she cried. Not sad tears exactly, but tears of rage and humiliation and something else. Something that felt like the beginning of a decision. When she came back to the table, she didn't say anything. She just sat down and she finished her meal in silence. But something had changed inside her. Some line had been crossed. Some fundamental acceptance had been shattered. The drive home was silent. Marcus didn't seem to notice Sarah's emotional state. He was too busy talking about his day at work, too busy making comments about how attractive the other women at the restaurant had been, too busy existing in a world where his wife had become invisible. When they got home, Sarah went directly to bed. Marcus stayed up, doing some kind of work-related task on his laptop. Sarah lay in the dark and she thought about her life. She thought about how she'd sacrificed her career for this man. She thought about how she'd given up her identity as a dancer. She thought about how she'd spent the last 15 years slowly disappearing, becoming less and less important, becoming less and less visible. And she understood, lying there in the dark, that if she didn't do something radical, this was going to be her life forever. This was going to be her reality. A husband who was ashamed of her. Children who would grow up thinking that women's value was determined by their appearance, and a slow, painful dissolving of every bit of self-respect she had left. She made a decision that night. She decided that she was going to change. Not for Marcus. Not for her husband or her children or anyone else. For herself. She was going to transform her body. She was going to prove that she could do it. And she was going to do it not because Marcus wanted her to, but because she wanted to. Because she deserved to. The next morning, Sarah woke up and she didn't eat breakfast. She went for a run. It was painful and difficult and she could only manage 3 miles before she had to stop, exhausted. But she did it. And the next day, she did it again. She started going to the gym in the mornings before the children woke up. She started eating healthier. She started tracking her calories. She started doing the work. It was hard. It was exhausting. But there was something driving her forward that hadn't been there before. There was anger. There was pride. There was the fierce determination to prove that she could do this. Months passed. Sarah lost weight. 5 pounds. Then 10. Then 20. Her clothes started to fit differently. Her face started to change. Her energy started to increase. She was becoming visible again, but not for anyone else. She was becoming visible to herself. Marcus noticed the changes. He started complimenting her again. He started looking at her the way he used to look at her. He started acting like he was attracted to her again. And Sarah realized something crucial in that moment. She didn't care. His approval no longer mattered to her. She was doing this for herself, not for him. She continued to lose weight. 30 pounds lost. 35. 40. She was approaching her pre-pregnancy weight. She was approaching the body she used to have. But something was different now. She didn't have the same desperation. She didn't have the same need for external validation. She was simply becoming healthier because she wanted to be healthy. And then her phone rang. It was a Friday afternoon. Sarah was at home, working on a graphic design project for a client, when her phone rang. The number was unknown. She almost didn't answer it. "Hello," she said. "Hi, is this Sarah Mitchell?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes," Sarah said, confused. "Who is this?" "This is Dr. Victoria Harmon's office," the woman said. "Dr. Harmon is one of the most renowned plastic surgeons in the United States. I'm calling because we have a very unusual situation. Someone has submitted your information and your photographs to Dr. Harmon, and she's very interested in speaking with you about a potential opportunity." Sarah's first thought was that this was a scam. Someone was trying to trick her into paying for some kind of cosmetic procedure. "I'm not interested," she said. "I don't want plastic surgery." "I understand that," the woman said. "But Dr. Harmon specifically asked me to tell you that this would be a pro bono case. Dr. Harmon would not be charging you anything. And before you say no, I think you should know that Dr. Harmon gets approximately 10,000 requests like this every year. She accepts fewer than 5. You would be one of those 5. Sarah was silent. There had to be a catch. There had to be something she was missing. What does she want? Sarah asked finally. She wants to talk to you, the woman said. She wants to understand your story. She wants to know why someone submitted your information. And she wants to see if you'd be interested in a complete transformation. The transformation would be documented and would be used for Dr. Harmon's documentary series. It would be televised. Sarah hung up. She was sure it was a scam. She was sure it was someone trying to manipulate her. But the call had unsettled her. Someone had submitted her information to one of the most famous plastic surgeons in the country? Who would do that? The answer came when her phone rang again, 3 hours later. This time it was Marcus. Sarah, he said, his voice panicked. I did something. And I need to explain it to you before you hear about it from someone else. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What did you do? She asked. I submitted your information to Dr. Victoria Harmon, he said. I submitted your photographs and your story. And apparently she's interested in working with you. Sarah, this is an amazing opportunity. This is a chance to get a complete makeover from the most famous plastic surgeon in the country. This could change everything for you. Sarah felt something shift inside her. Her husband had submitted her information to a plastic surgeon without asking her permission. He had submitted her photographs without her consent. He had made a decision about her body without including her in the decision. It was a violation that cut deeper than the humiliation in the restaurant. I can't believe you did that, she said quietly. Sarah, I did it for you, Marcus said. I did it because I wanted to help you. I wanted to give you an opportunity to really transform yourself. I wanted. You wanted me to change, Sarah interrupted. You wanted me to become someone different. You wanted me to stop embarrassing you. That's not fair, Marcus said. I was trying to help. You were trying to fix me, Sarah said. Like I'm broken. Like I'm something that needs to be repaired. She hung up the phone. Her hands were shaking. She was angry. She was violated. She was also, if she was being completely honest with herself, intrigued. 2 days later, Sarah found herself in a consultation room with Dr. Victoria Harmon. Dr. Harmon was a woman in her 50s with the kind of face that suggested she'd had work done, but not so much that it looked unnatural. She was elegant and intelligent, and she had an air of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Tell me your story, Dr. Harmon said, without preamble. So Sarah told her. She told her about being a dancer. She told her about giving up her career for her family. She told her about slowly gaining weight and losing confidence. She told her about her husband's humiliation in the restaurant. She told her about the past several months of transformation. She told her about the anger that had been driving her forward. Dr. Harmon listened without interrupting. When Sarah was finished, Dr. Harmon was quiet for a long moment. I need to tell you something, Dr. Harmon said finally. I get thousands of requests every year from people who want free plastic surgery. Most of them come from insecurity. Most of them come from people who think that changing their body will somehow change their lives or make them happy. And I turn down almost all of them. Because I've learned that plastic surgery doesn't fix what's broken inside. It only reflects what's broken on the outside. Sarah felt her hope diminishing. She'd thought maybe Dr. Harmon would help her. But your case is different, Dr. Harmon continued. Your case is different because you've already done the hard work. You've already lost the weight. You've already changed your body. You've already proven that you can do it. And you've done it for yourself, not for anyone else. That's the rare case. That's the case where surgery actually makes sense. She leaned forward. What I'm interested in, Dr. Harmon said, is documenting your complete transformation. I want to show people what happens when someone goes from being humiliated and invisibly to becoming powerful and visible. But more importantly, I want to document what happens in the marriage. I want to see if your husband understands what he did. I want to see if he grows. I want to see if he changes. Sarah underwent a series of cosmetic procedures over the next 6 months. She had liposuction to remove stubborn fat deposits. She had a breast lift to restore the shape that had been changed by pregnancy and time. She had a tummy tuck to remove the loose skin from weight loss. She had some subtle facial work, a small nose refinement, a slight chin augmentation, some fillers to restore volume that age and weight loss had taken. But here was the thing that nobody expected. The surgeries weren't the transformation. The surgeries were just the physical manifestation of a transformation that had already happened internally. The real transformation was that Sarah had reclaimed her power. The real transformation was that she'd stopped needing Marcus's approval to feel like she mattered. The real transformation was that she'd learned to value herself not based on her appearance, but based on her strength and her intelligence and her resilience. When the surgeries were complete, Sarah looked in the mirror and she saw herself. Not the version of herself that Marcus had wanted her to be, but the version of herself that she wanted to be. Marcus, meanwhile, was having a very different experience. He was being filmed for Dr. Harmon's documentary. He was being asked to explain his behavior. He was being confronted with footage of the restaurant incident. He was being forced to examine the vanity and cruelty that had defined his behavior toward his wife. It was not a comfortable process. The transformation was revealed on television 6 months after the surgeries were complete. Dr. Harmon's documentary aired on a major streaming network. The episode about Sarah became one of the most watched episodes of the entire series. The documentary showed Sarah's journey. It showed the humiliation. It showed the anger. It showed the months of hard work at the gym and the careful nutrition. It showed the surgeries. But most importantly, it showed the before and after conversations between Sarah and Marcus. In the before footage, Marcus talked about how disappointed he was in his wife's appearance. He talked about how he'd married a dancer and she'd let herself go. He talked about how he deserved to be with someone who took care of themselves the way he did. In the after footage, Marcus was confronted with his own words. He was confronted with footage of him humiliating Sarah in front of the fitness model. He was confronted with the reality of what his behavior had done to his marriage. And something happened that nobody expected, least of all Marcus. He broke down. He cried. He admitted that he'd been using his body as a substitute for actual character. He admitted that he'd been hiding his own insecurities behind his obsession with appearance. He admitted that he'd treated his wife like she was an object to be improved rather than a person to be loved. But the most important moment came at the end of the documentary. Sarah was asked, "Now that you've completed your transformation, now that you look the way you wanted to look, are you happy?" And Sarah said something that resonated with millions of people watching. "I'm happy because I did this for myself," she said. "I'm not happy because I look different. I'm happy because I proved to myself that I could do something difficult. I'm happy because I stopped needing someone else's approval to feel like I mattered. I'm happy because I became visible to myself instead of just waiting to be visible to someone else." Then she was asked, "And what about your marriage?" Sarah paused for a long moment. "My marriage is different now," she said. "It's different because I'm different. I'm not desperate to please Marcus anymore. I'm not waiting for him to notice me or appreciate me. I love him, but I don't need him in the way I used to need him. And I think that's actually healthier for both of us." What happened after the documentary aired was something that Dr. Harmon had anticipated but nobody else had expected. Marcus's colleagues at work started treating him differently. His friends started making comments about his behavior. People recognized him on the street and they weren't always kind. He became, for the first time in his life, the subject of judgment based on his character rather than his appearance. It was devastating to him. He wasn't used to being judged negatively. He wasn't used to being seen as the villain in someone else's story. He went to therapy. Real therapy, not the kind where you just talk about your childhood and your issues. The kind where you actually have to confront the fact that you're not a good person and you have to decide whether you want to change that. Sarah, meanwhile, continued with her life. She started a coaching business helping other women who'd been in similar situations. She reconnected with her love of dance and started taking classes again. She became visible not just physically, but in every aspect of her life. And Marcus slowly started to change. He stopped going to the gym 5 days a week. He started spending more time with his children. He started actually listening when his wife spoke. He started understanding that being muscular and attractive wasn't the same as being a good person. 1 year after the documentary aired, Sarah and Marcus were sitting in their therapist's office. The therapist asked them what had changed. "I learned that I was wrong," Marcus said simply. "I learned that I treated my wife like she was a possession that needed to be improved instead of a person that needed to be loved. I learned that my body was never the problem. My character was the problem." He looked at Sarah. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for humiliating you. I'm sorry for submitting your information to Dr. Harmon without asking. I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't good enough. I'm sorry for everything." "I forgive you," Sarah said. "But I need you to understand something. I didn't do this for you. I did this for me. And I would do it again whether you were here or not." Marcus nodded. He understood what she was saying. He understood that his wife had become independent of him in a way that she never had been before. He understood that she didn't need him anymore. She just chose to be with him. And somehow that was more meaningful than anything that had come before. 2 years after the documentary aired, Sarah and Marcus were still together. But their marriage was different. It was based on mutual respect instead of Marcus's vanity. It was based on Sarah's independence instead of Sarah's dependence. It was a real partnership instead of a hierarchy. Sarah's coaching business had become successful. She'd helped hundreds of women transform not just their bodies, but their lives. She'd shown them that transformation wasn't about being attractive for someone else. It was about being strong for yourself. Marcus had stepped back from his obsession with fitness. He still worked out, but it was no longer the central focus of his identity. He was developing other aspects of himself. He was becoming a more present father. He was becoming a more thoughtful husband. He was becoming a more interesting person. And people started to treat him differently. Not because he was muscular or handsome, but because he was actually kind. He was actually thoughtful. He was actually worth spending time with. On the 2-year anniversary of the documentary airing, Dr. Harmon asked Sarah to participate in a follow-up interview. The interview would air on her streaming network. "How do you feel?" Dr. Harmon asked, "about the transformation?" "I feel grateful," Sarah said. "Not just for the surgeries or the weight loss, but for the entire process. I feel grateful that I was pushed to my breaking point. Because my breaking point led me to rebuild myself. My breaking point led me to become someone I could actually respect. My breaking point was actually my beginning." "And your husband?" Dr. Harmon asked. "My husband learned that vanity is not the same as worth," Sarah said. "He learned that a perfect body doesn't make you a perfect person. He learned that the most attractive thing a person can be is kind, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in someone else's well-being. He's still learning that. But he's trying. And that's all any of us can really do." And here's what I want to ask you in the comments section. Do you think Sarah made the right choice in getting the surgeries? Do you think she should have left Marcus instead of trying to save the marriage? Do you think people should change their appearance for themselves, or should they accept themselves as they are? Do you think Marcus deserved to be humiliated the way he was? And most importantly, do you think that vanity and character are the same thing, or are they different? Rate this story from 0 to 10. Let me know what you think. And please, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Because there are so many stories like this one. So many stories about people who look perfect on the outside but are broken on the inside. So many stories about transformation that has nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with becoming who you're actually capable of being. But the story doesn't end there. Because transformation isn't linear. Transformation isn't a simple before and after. Transformation is messy and complicated and full of moments where you think you're going backward instead of forward. 3 months after the 2-year anniversary interview, Sarah received a message from someone she hadn't heard from in years. It was Jenna, the fitness model from the restaurant. Jenna had watched the documentary. Jenna had seen herself in the footage, the moment where she'd been used as a tool to humiliate another woman. Jenna's message said, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize what was happening that night. I didn't understand that I was being used to make someone else feel small. I've spent the last 2 years thinking about that moment. Thinking about how many times I've been part of systems that make women feel inadequate. I want to apologize to you. And I want to ask if you'd be willing to talk about this with me." Sarah was hesitant. She didn't want to relive that moment. But she also understood something important. She understood that Jenna had been complicit, but not malicious. Jenna had been used as a prop in Marcus's fantasy, the same way Sarah had been. They were both victims of a system that valued appearance above character. Sarah agreed to meet with Jenna. They met at a coffee shop, not at a gym, not at a place where appearance would be the focus. And they talked. Really talked. Jenna shared her own story, about the pressure to maintain the perfect body, about the loneliness of being valued only for appearance, about the emptiness of a life built entirely on how you look. And Sarah realized something profound in that conversation. She realized that Marcus's cruelty had hurt more than one person. It had hurt Sarah, obviously, but it had also hurt Jenna, by making her complicit in something she didn't fully understand. It had hurt their children, who had seen their mother being disrespected. It had hurt everyone in that restaurant who witnessed it and felt the weight of judgment that came with being evaluated and found lacking. Jenna and Sarah became friends. Real friends. Not connected by the thing that had brought them together, Marcus's cruelty, but connected by their understanding of what it meant to be valued primarily for appearance in a world that was obsessed with appearance. Meanwhile, Marcus was having his own reckoning. Because the documentary hadn't just changed how other people saw him. It had changed how he saw himself. And what he saw was someone he didn't like very much. He started going to a different gym. Not because he stopped caring about fitness, but because he cared about it for different reasons. He started training because it felt good, not because it looked good. He started eating well because it made him healthy, not because it made his muscles bigger. He started exercising for himself, not for the approval of people around him. But more importantly, he started spending real time with his children. He started helping Sarah with her coaching business. He started volunteering at a local community center, teaching fitness classes to people who couldn't afford expensive gym memberships. And he started to understand something that had never been clear to him before. He started to understand that the most important thing he had wasn't his body. It was his influence. It was his ability to affect other people. And if he was going to use that influence, he wanted to use it to build people up, not to tear them down. He wrote a letter to Sarah. A long letter, handwritten, not typed. A letter where he explained everything he'd been thinking and feeling and realizing. A letter where he asked, not for forgiveness, but for the opportunity to be a better person. Sarah read the letter and she cried. Not because she felt sorry for Marcus, but because she recognized that he was finally doing the work. He was finally taking responsibility. He was finally understanding the damage that his behavior had caused. She didn't respond to the letter immediately. She took time. She thought about what forgiveness actually meant. She thought about whether she wanted to stay in the marriage or leave. She thought about what was best for her children, for herself, for everyone involved. And after 3 weeks, she asked Marcus to have a conversation. "I read your letter," she said. "And I believe that you're genuinely trying to change. But I need you to understand something. Change isn't something you do once and then you're done. Change is something you have to recommit to every single day. And I'm not sure I'm willing to stay if you're not willing to commit to that." "I am," Marcus said immediately. "I will. Every day." "We'll see," Sarah said. "Trust is something that's earned back slowly. It's not something you can just declare that you're doing. It's something you prove through action." Over the next year, Marcus proved it. He went to therapy consistently. He read books about emotional intelligence and toxic masculinity, and the ways that systems of appearance-based judgment hurt everyone. He had honest conversations with his children about his behavior and how it had been wrong. And slowly, incrementally, Sarah started to trust him again. Not in the dependent way she used to trust him, but in a healthier way. A way where she trusted him because he was showing her, through his actions, that he could be trusted. Their marriage didn't go back to what it was before. It couldn't because they were different people now. But it became something better. It became a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection instead of vanity and control. Sarah's coaching business continued to grow. She started getting requests from major media outlets to appear on their shows and talk about her transformation. She started getting book deals. She started becoming famous not because of how she looked, but because of what she had to say. One day, she was invited to appear on a major morning talk show. The hosts asked her about her journey. They asked her about the surgeries. They asked her about her marriage. But they also asked her something that nobody had asked her before. "If you could go back," the host asked, "and tell yourself something before all of this happened, what would you say?" Sarah thought about this carefully. She thought about the woman she'd been in that restaurant, wearing the too tight dress, feeling invisible and ashamed. "I would tell myself," she said, "that I'm going to go through something painful. I'm going to be humiliated. I'm going to question my worth. I'm going to spend months working on my body. And all of that is going to be worth it. But not for the reasons you might think. It's going to be worth it because it's going to teach you who you actually are. It's going to teach you that you're stronger than you believe. It's going to teach you that you don't need anyone else's approval to matter. It's going to teach you that transformation isn't about changing yourself for other people. It's about becoming who you're capable of being." She paused. "But I would also tell myself," she continued, "that the surgeries aren't the most important part. The important part is the work you do internally. The important part is deciding that you matter. The important part is refusing to let someone else's judgment be your reality." 3 years after the documentary aired, Sarah was invited to speak at a university about body image and self-worth. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of young women had come to listen to her story. After her speech, there was a question and answer period. A young woman raised her hand. "I'm in a relationship where my boyfriend criticizes my appearance," the young woman said. "He tells me I'm not good enough. He tells me I should change. Do you think I should try to change myself for him?" The auditorium went silent. Everyone was waiting to hear what Sarah would say. "No," Sarah said clearly. "You should leave him. I didn't leave Marcus, and I don't regret that choice. But that doesn't mean you have to make the same choice I made. Some relationships are worth saving. Some relationships are worth working on. But some relationships are toxic and they need to end. The only person who can decide which category your relationship falls into is you. But I will tell you this. You should never change yourself for someone else's approval. You should only change yourself if you're doing it for you." Years passed. Sarah and Marcus stayed together. Their children grew up watching their parents work through difficulty and come out the other side stronger. Their children learned that relationships require work. Their children learned that change is possible. Their children learned that the most important thing you can be is kind to the people you love. Marcus never became famous. He never became well known for anything in particular. But he became someone that people wanted to be around. He became someone that his children respected and looked up to. He became someone who made a genuine difference in the lives of people around him. And Sarah became what she'd always had the potential to be. A woman who was visible not because of how she looked, but because of what she had to say. A woman who used her platform to help other people. A woman who understood that transformation wasn't about appearance, even though her transformation had involved changing her appearance. Years later, when Sarah was being interviewed for a major magazine, she was asked a final question. "What do you think was the most important moment in your transformation?" And Sarah thought about this. She thought about the moment in the restaurant when Marcus humiliated her. She thought about the moment she decided to change. She thought about the moment she looked in the mirror after the surgeries and saw herself. She thought about the moment Marcus broke down and admitted his wrongs. But the moment that came to mind was different. It was a moment that had happened quietly, without fanfare or documentation or anyone watching. It was a moment about a year after the surgeries, when Sarah was working late on a project for a client. Marcus came into her home office with a cup of tea. He didn't say anything. He just put the tea down next to her and he kissed her on the top of her head and he left. It was a small gesture. It was nothing dramatic. It was just a man showing affection to a woman he loved, without any expectation of return or any judgment of her appearance or any agenda beyond the simple desire to care for someone. That, Sarah said, that moment was the most important moment. Because that was the moment when I knew that Marcus had fundamentally changed. Not because he was perfect, but because he was capable of loving someone without needing them to be perfect. He was capable of loving someone without evaluating them or judging them or trying to improve them. He was just capable of love. And that was the real transformation. Not mine. His. The article about Sarah was published in the magazine's lifestyle section. It became one of the most read articles of that year. Thousands of people wrote to Sarah sharing their own stories. Stories about partners who had criticized their appearance. Stories about their own transformations. Stories about learning to love themselves. Sarah responded to every single message. Not because she had to, but because she understood the power of being seen and acknowledged. She understood that the greatest gift she could give someone was her attention and her recognition of their struggle. And in doing that, in witnessing other people's pain and transformation, Sarah found meaning that went far beyond her own story. She found purpose. She found a calling. She found a way to take the worst moment of her life and transform it into something that helped other people. And here's what I want to ask you as we end this extended story. Do you see now why Sarah's journey was about so much more than losing weight? Do you understand that her transformation wasn't really about her appearance at all, but about reclaiming her power and her sense of self-worth? Do you see why Marcus's journey was equally important? Do you understand that his transformation wasn't about becoming a less muscular or less attractive man, but about becoming a man of actual character and actual kindness? Do you see how these two people, who started in a relationship defined by vanity and cruelty, were able to rebuild something real and meaningful? And most importantly, do you understand that transformation is never really about how you look on the outside? Real transformation is always about what happens on the inside. Real transformation is about becoming someone you can actually respect. Real transformation is about learning that your worth isn't determined by your appearance, but by your character. Real transformation is about understanding that the most attractive thing any of us can be is kind. Rate this extended story from 0 to 10. Tell me what you think about Sarah's choice to stay in the marriage. Tell me what you think about Marcus's transformation. Tell me what you think about the idea that we can change fundamentally if we're willing to do the work. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe now. Turn on that notification bell. Because there are so many stories like this one. Stories about people who look perfect on the outside but have work to do on the inside. Stories about relationships that are broken and then healed. Stories about the power of choosing to see other people as real humans worthy of love and respect, instead of seeing them as objects to be judged and evaluated. There are stories about what happens when we stop valuing appearance above character. There are stories about what happens when we learn that the most important thing we can be is kind. There are stories about real transformation, the kind that changes everything. I'll see you next time.